My sister excluded me from her wedding to please the parents who abandoned us. I raised her for 22 years, but her fiancé stopped the ceremony when he discovered I wasn't invited. And everything exploded. I'm 32 years old. I work as an office manager at an accounting firm, and what happened 10 months ago literally destroyed me in a way that I still don't know if I'll ever be able to fully recover from. My younger sister, Madison, excluded me from her wedding because our parents, who abandoned us 22 years ago, decided to reappear, and she thought it would be awkward to have me there with them present. Yes, you read that right. The sister I raised since she was a baby basically kicked me out of one of the most important days of her life because she didn't want her biological parents to feel bad. The thing is, I need to tell this whole story because even now, after everything that happened, there are still days when I wake up and think that maybe it was somehow my fault. You know, like if I had done something different, all of this wouldn't have exploded the way it did. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was 10 years old and Madison had just turned 2. My parents, and when I say my parents, I mean the people who brought us into this world but clearly didn't understand what it meant to actually be parents, decided one day that they wanted to start a business in another state. I don't remember all the details exactly because I was so young, but basically they left us with our paternal grandparents and took off. Just like that, with the promise they'd come back when things were stable. Spoiler alert, they never came back. Well, not until a year and a half ago. But I'll get to that part. My grandparents, rest in peace, were incredible. They raised us with all the love they could give us. They gave us stability, sent us to school, taught us values, everything that parents should do but that ours decided wasn't their priority. My grandfather was a retired mechanic and my grandmother worked part-time at a library, and honestly, they didn't have much money, but they always made us feel safe and loved. Things got difficult when I was about 19. My grandfather died. First, heart attack, and my grandmother followed him 2 years later, literally died of sadness. According to what the doctors said, it was her heart too, but we all knew it was because she missed my grandfather too much. At that point, Madison was 13 and I had just turned 21. I was in college trying to get my degree in business administration, and suddenly I became her legal guardian because our parents, surprise, surprise, didn't answer a single call when social services tried to contact them to let them know their daughters had been orphaned. So there I was, 21 years old, trying to finish college, working 2 jobs to pay rent on a small apartment where the 2 of us lived, and basically being mom and sister at the same time to a teenager who was going through puberty and dealing with the grief of having lost the only parents she really knew. It wasn't easy, obviously. There were moments when I literally didn't know how we were going to pay the electric bill or buy food. Moments when Madison had problems at school and I had no idea how to handle them because, you know what I mean? I was basically a kid too, trying to pretend I knew what I was doing. But we made it work, you know? Somehow we always found a way. I left college for a couple of years to focus on working full-time and giving Madison everything she needed. I took her to her soccer practices, went to all the parent-teacher meetings at school, helped her with homework, even though many times I didn't understand high school math either because I was never very good at it. Taught her to drive when she turned 16, was there when she had her first heartbreak. Everything. I literally sacrificed my entire youth to make sure she had as normal and happy a life as possible. Madison was my world, you know? Watching her grow up and become this incredible, intelligent, caring person was what kept me motivated on the difficult days. She got into college with a partial scholarship to study graphic design, and I was so proud. I cried like a baby the day I dropped her off at her dorm. By that point, I had already gone back to finish my own degree too, working during the day and taking night classes, and I finally graduated when I was about 26. Things were going well. Honestly. Madison met David when she was 22. He was a super nice guy, worked in it, 26 years old, from a normal, functional family, and from the first moment she introduced him to me, I knew he was good for her. You could tell he really loved her and treated her well, and that was all I wanted for my sister. Then, about a year and a half ago, something happened that I didn't see coming at all. Our parents, after 22 years of complete silence, decided it was a good time to reappear in our lives. Madison called me one day, super excited, saying that Dad had contacted her through Facebook, that he had seen her photos and wanted to reconnect. I honestly didn't know what to feel. Like, seriously? After more than 2 decades, they just show up like nothing happened? But Madison was so happy, so hopeful, that I didn't want to ruin it for her by telling her what I really thought. She gave them another chance almost immediately, started talking to them regularly, doing video calls, and about 3 months after they reappeared, they moved back to our city. They said their business had gone under years ago and they'd been dealing with financial and personal problems, and that now that things were better, they wanted to make up for lost time with their daughters. I went to that first meeting because Madison asked me to, but honestly, it was super awkward. My parents, who were basically strangers to me at this point, were acting like they were parents of the year, asking me about my life, my job, if I had a boyfriend, all those superficial questions people ask when they're trying to fill an uncomfortable silence. I responded politely, but without giving them much real information. You know, like 1 or 2 word answers. Madison, on the other hand, was radiant, telling them everything about her life, about David, about their plans to get married soon. My parents seemed delighted with everything, especially my mom, who wouldn't stop crying, saying she was so happy to be present in this new stage of Madison's life. I just kept thinking, where were you when Madison learned to walk? Where were you when she graduated from high school? Where were you when she cried at night missing our grandparents? But I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to ruin the moment for my sister. After that meeting, I basically kept my distance. I didn't block them or anything dramatic like that, but I didn't make an effort to build a relationship with them either. Madison saw them often, invited them to dinner, went to their apartment on weekends, and that's fine. It was her decision. I was still close to Madison, or so I thought. We talked almost every day, still met for lunch or went shopping, and when David proposed to her about a year ago, I was the first person she called, screaming with happiness on the phone. I helped her pick out her dress, went with her to taste cakes, offered to help with whatever she needed for the wedding. Never, not for a second, did I think what happened next was a possibility. About 6 months before the wedding, Madison invited me for coffee. I thought maybe she wanted to talk about some detail of the ceremony or ask me to give a speech or something like that. But when I got there, she had this weird look on her face, like nervous and guilty at the same time, and I knew something bad was going to happen. She sat down, ordered her latte, and after about 5 minutes of casual conversation, she finally dropped the bomb. She told me, "Laura, there's something I need to tell you, and I know you're not going to like it, but I hope you can understand." And I'm like, "What? What happened?" And she tells me that Mom and Dad are going to be at the wedding, which I already knew and honestly didn't care about. I could deal with seeing them on that special day for her. But then she added, "And the thing is, they don't feel comfortable with you being there because it would be awkward for everyone, so I decided it's better if you don't come." I swear I thought I'd heard wrong. I asked her to repeat what she'd just said because it couldn't be real. It just couldn't. And she repeated it, with this super calm voice, as if she was telling me something completely reasonable, that basically I was uninvited from her wedding because my parents, the people who abandoned us, didn't want to see me there. I asked her if she was joking, if this was some kind of test or what, but she just said she'd thought about it a lot, and this was the best decision to avoid drama on her special day. I told her, "Madison, I raised you. I was there when they weren't. I sacrificed everything for you. And now you're telling me I can't go to your wedding because they're going to feel uncomfortable." She started crying, saying she was sorry but she needed to have her parents there, that they had lost so much time and this was their moment to get it back. I don't know how I didn't explode right there in the middle of the coffee shop. I got up, told her that her decision was clear and that I respected her choice but not to expect me to be happy about it, and I left. I cried the whole way home, like that ugly crying where you can't even breathe properly. The next few months were horrible. Madison tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. I sent her a message saying I needed space and to please leave me alone. My friends from work couldn't believe it when I told them. One of them even suggested I show up at the wedding anyway, but I'm not that type of person who causes dramatic scenes. I decided that on her wedding day I was going to be as far away as possible, so I booked a weekend at a cabin about 3 hours from the city, alone with my thoughts and a bottle of wine. But then something happened that honestly left me in shock and made this story even more dramatic than it already was. On the wedding day, I was at the cabin trying to distract myself watching movies and basically pretending that day didn't exist. When I started getting like 20 calls in a row from a number I didn't know, I finally answered, and it was Brittany, Madison's best friend, who sounded absolutely hysterical. She told me she needed to tell me what had happened at the wedding and that Madison had been calling me nonstop but I wasn't answering. I told her that obviously I wasn't going to answer after what she did, but Brittany told me I had to hear this. Turns out David didn't know anything about the fact that I had been uninvited. Madison had told him I couldn't go because I had an important work commitment out of town, basically a complete lie. So at the reception, after the ceremony, one of David's uncles apparently asked Madison where her sister was, that he had heard so much about me and wanted to meet me. Madison got nervous and said something vague about how I couldn't come, but the uncle kept insisting, asking why, and saying what a shame that the person who raised her couldn't be at her wedding. David heard this conversation and came over asking what they were talking about, and that's when everything fell apart. Brittany told me that David confronted Madison in front of everyone, asking her why she had lied to him about my absence, and Madison tried to change the subject, but David wouldn't let her. He started asking directly, "Laura isn't here because you didn't invite her?" And Madison went pale and couldn't speak. Then Madison's parents, my biological parents but who honestly don't deserve that title, tried to intervene, saying it was a happy moment and this wasn't the place for that conversation. But David completely ignored them and kept pressing Madison until she finally admitted the truth in front of all the guests. She said yes, that she hadn't invited me, because she wanted her parents to be there and my presence was going to make things awkward. David, according to Brittany, stayed silent for like a full minute that felt eternal, and then asked for the microphone they were using for speeches. Everyone thought he was going to give his thank you speech or something, but instead he told all the guests the complete truth. He told them that Madison's older sister, who was practically her mother since she was 2 years old, wasn't present at the wedding because the bride decided it was more important to please the parents who abandoned them 22 years ago than to honor the person who sacrificed her entire life for her. He explained that I left college, worked multiple jobs, gave up my youth to make sure Madison had everything she needed, and that the reward I received for all that was being excluded from the most important day of her life. Brittany told me you could hear a pin drop in that room, that people were absolutely shocked. Madison was crying, telling him to please stop, that they could talk about this in private, but David told her something that apparently was devastating. He told her that he couldn't marry someone capable of betraying the person who loved her most in this world in that way, that the woman he thought he knew would never have done something like that, and that he clearly had been wrong about who she really was. And then, in front of everyone, he took off his wedding ring, left it on the table, and walked out. He simply walked toward the exit and left, leaving Madison standing there in her wedding dress crying hysterically. But wait, because it gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. My parents, after witnessing all this drama that was partially caused by them, also decided it was too much to handle and left the reception without even saying goodbye to Madison. They left her there alone. Again, like they did 22 years ago. The irony isn't lost on me, and honestly, if it wasn't so sad, it would be almost poetic. Brittany told me that Madison eventually ran out of the event hall too, that many of the guests left confused and uncomfortable, and that basically the wedding became a complete disaster. After Brittany told me all this, Madison started calling me directly. She left like 15 voicemails that day, all of them her crying and begging me to please come, that she needed me, that she made a terrible mistake and didn't know what to do. And here's the thing. I had every right to ghost her completely. To tell her to go screw herself and that now she understood what it felt like to be abandoned by the person who's supposed to love you unconditionally. But I couldn't. Yes, I was still super hurt and angry. But I was also worried because at the end of the day, she was still the kid I raised, the sister I loved despite everything. But I also couldn't just run to rescue her like I always had. Because if I did that, then nothing would change and she would never really understand the weight of her actions. So I sent her a text message, just one, telling her I was okay, that I wasn't in danger or anything, but I wasn't going to come. I told her that she made her decision when she decided I didn't deserve to be at her wedding, and now she had to deal with the consequences of that decision alone. It was brutal, I know, but I felt it was necessary. For the next few weeks, Madison kept trying to contact me, sending long texts, apologizing, explaining that she had been selfish and stupid, that she completely understood why I was angry and would do anything to fix things. I read the messages but didn't respond. I still wasn't ready. About 2 months after the wedding disaster, Madison sent me a different message. She wasn't begging or crying in the text. It just said she understood I needed time. But please, when I was ready, she wanted us to meet in person to really talk about everything. She said she had been going to therapy, working on understanding why she had made the decisions she made, and that she had things she needed to tell me. I honestly didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to just cut off all contact and move on with my life, but another part, probably the part that had been her older sister and mother figure for 24 years, still had hope that maybe we could get through this somehow. I responded after thinking about it for like a week, telling her I was willing to hear what she had to say, but I wasn't promising anything. We agreed to meet at a public park, neutral territory, let's say, on a day we both had free. When I saw her arrive that day, she looked different, like thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, clearly hadn't been sleeping well. We sat on a bench, and at first, neither of us knew how to start. Finally, she spoke first and basically told me everything I needed to hear, but that didn't fix the damage that was already done. She told me she had been so desperate to have her biological parents in her life that she had lost sight of who had really been there for her all this time. That therapy had helped her understand she was trying to fill a void that those people were never going to be able to fill, and that in the process, she had hurt the only person who never abandoned her. She apologized. A lot of times, and I could see it was genuine. She also told me that David had contacted her after about a month and a half from the incident. Apparently, he felt bad about having humiliated her publicly like that. He didn't regret calling off the wedding because he felt it was the right thing to do, but he did regret doing it so dramatically in front of everyone. They had met to talk, just to have closure, but she told me they probably weren't getting back together because the damage was too big. About our parents? She told me that after they left the wedding again, she tried to contact them several times, but they basically told her all this was too much drama for them and they needed space. Ironic, right? History repeating itself. I listened to everything she told me without interrupting her, and when she finished, I honestly told her how I felt. I told her that her apology meant something, but it didn't erase the fact that she had made me feel exactly like our parents made us feel, disposable and not important enough. I told her that I had spent more than a decade of my life making sure she never felt that pain, and that she had given it back to me in the worst possible way. I think that's what really got to her, seeing me cry while I told her how I felt, because she started crying too, and told me she would spend the rest of her life trying to make it up to me if I gave her the chance. I didn't promise her anything that day. I just told her I needed more time, but the fact that we had met was already a step. We said goodbye with an awkward hug, and each went our separate ways. The following months were weird. Madison kept going to therapy and would send me occasional updates about her progress. Not expecting me to respond, but just so I knew she was working on herself. I also started going to therapy because, I don't know, all this had affected me more than I wanted to admit, and I needed help processing it. Fast forward to about 2 months ago. 10 months after the wedding disaster, Madison called me. And when I answered, I could hear in her voice that something important had happened. She told me that David and she had started talking again, that they had gone to couples therapy together because they both realized they still loved each other but needed to work on the issues that led to all that disaster. She told me that he now better understood her family situation and why she had made those decisions, although he still thought they were horrible decisions, and that she had worked hard on understanding her own behavior patterns and on establishing healthy boundaries with our parents, who, by the way, had moved to another state again a few months ago, again chasing some dream or business or who knows what. She asked me if we could meet again, in person, because there was something important she wanted to tell me. This time I accepted more easily because, honestly, therapy had helped me process a lot of my anger and pain, and while I still wasn't sure if our relationship could ever be what it was, I wasn't as closed off to the possibility of trying. We met at the same park as last time, and this time when she arrived, she looked better, more like the Madison I knew before all this drama. She sat down and told me straight up, "Laura, I know what I'm about to ask you is a lot and I probably don't have the right to ask it, but David and I decided we want to try again, and he wants to meet you." I stayed quiet because, what do you say to that? She continued explaining that David had said if they were going to have a future together, he needed to meet the most important person in Madison's life, which was me, and really understand the relationship we had. I told her I'd think about it, and after a few days of considering it, I decided I was okay with that. I met David about a month and a half ago at a casual restaurant, the three of us together. It was a bit awkward at first because we all knew the complete story and everything that had happened, but David was very direct with me. He thanked me for raising Madison, told me that after everything that happened, he had researched more about our story and couldn't even imagine how difficult it must have been for me to take on that responsibility so young. He told me his reaction at the wedding had been impulsive, but came from a place of genuine outrage because he had lost his older sister in a car accident when he was a teenager, and he couldn't understand how someone could voluntarily push their sister out of their life like that. That explained a lot about why he had reacted so strongly. The dinner was easier than I thought it would be. We talked about simple things: work, hobbies, future, plans, and slowly the tension decreased. At the end of the night, when we said goodbye, Madison hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for giving me another chance." I didn't say you're welcome or anything cheesy like that. I just nodded because I was still processing everything. Now, as of today, things are better but still not perfect. Madison and I have been seeing each other more often, like every 2 weeks or so, usually for lunch or coffee. The conversations are lighter than before, like we avoid talking much about our parents or about the wedding, but we're slowly rebuilding trust. She and David officially got back together about 3 weeks ago and are planning a small wedding, very intimate, only with their closest friends and immediate family. She told me she'd like me to be there, and honestly, I don't know yet what I'm going to do. I told her I'd think about it when the date gets closer. The thing about our parents is that Madison finally established boundaries with them. She told them she appreciated that they tried to come back into their lives, but their behavior, both in the past and now, showed they weren't ready or weren't capable of being the parents she needed. According to what she told me, they didn't take that well and basically told her that if that was the case, then it was better they didn't have contact, and she accepted that. They moved to another state a few months ago for another business project or whatever, and this time Madison isn't devastated by their departure, which I think is progress. Last week, Madison came to my apartment for the first time since all this. We had always been meeting in public places, but she asked me if she could come over and I said yes. She sat on the couch where so many times we had watched movies together when she was younger, and we just chatted for hours about everything and nothing at the same time. Before leaving, she told me, "Laura, I know I'm never going to be able to fully make up for what I did, and I know our relationship probably will never be exactly like it was before, but I want you to know that I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that that day didn't reflect how I really feel about you. I don't know if we'll ever get back to having the relationship we had before all this. Probably not, because that kind of betrayal changes things in permanent ways. But I think maybe we can build something new, something different, but still valuable. I guess that's the best I can hope for now. There are still days when I wake up and feel that pain in my chest when I think about how she excluded me from her wedding, days when I wonder if I'm being foolish for even trying to repair this relationship. But there are also days when she says something that makes me laugh like before, or when I see how she's really working on being a better person, and I think maybe it's worth trying. I don't have a perfect movie-like ending for this story. Madison is still my sister and probably always will be, but the dynamic changed forever. I'm learning to be okay with that, to accept that relationships evolve and sometimes they need to break completely in order to rebuild in a healthier way. Is it enough? Honestly, I don't know yet. Ask me in a year and maybe I'll have a better answer.